ChatGPT said this color correction was working well, but when I switched the node on and off, almost nothing changed. So can ChatGPT color grade raw footage, or does it simply know how to sound like a colorist? I gave it 4 increasingly difficult challenges, 1 attempt and 1 chance to fix every result. I started by giving ChatGPT a short brief. For the first 3 tests, it could only use standard DaVinci Resolve tools. It could use up to 6 nodes and had to give me specific instructions for everyone. When an instruction was unclear, I followed the most literal interpretation I could. I chose a fairly simple landscape shot. I asked for a polished cinematic grade that still looked believable. It started with white balance. It cooled the image slightly, added a small amount of magenta and removed some of the yellow-green cast from the original frame. And honestly, that worked. The image immediately felt cleaner. The next node added contrast and gave the waterfall and rocks more shape without destroying the bright water. Then ChatGPT made a decision I was not expecting. Instead of simply pushing saturation, it used color boost and reduced saturation in the darkest parts of the image. That created richer color without filling the shadows with muddy green. But its best decision came later. ChatGPT used an HSL qualifier to isolate the turquoise water. It made the water richer while keeping the bright waterfall foam much cleaner. This was probably the smartest move it made during the entire experiment. Not every decision worked that well. Its selective adjustments to the vegetation made some of the greens feel slightly digital. The final vignette instruction was also unclear, and I was not completely sure whether I had created the outside correction exactly as ChatGPT intended. When ChatGPT saw its own grade, it correctly noticed that the image had become slightly too saturated and digital. It made smart selective adjustments and produced something a beginner could realistically use. I think that it looks really good for an AI color grading, but an easy landscape does not prove that ChatGPT understands priorities. So the next shot gave it several competing problems at once. It contained clean white feathers, very dark feathers, warm sunlight, green grass, blue water and a bright orange beak. Once again, it began with white balance. Then it added a very small amount of contrast. Okay, straight to the HDR wheels without even touching saturation and colors. It tried to protect the white feathers, it isolated the grass, but the problem was that almost nothing was changing in the image. By the time all 6 nodes were finished, most of the visible change still came from the first white balance correction. ChatGPT was solving small local problems before it had created a proper global grade. So I sent it the result and gave it 1 chance to correct itself. It noticed that the frame had become too cool and slightly too dark. But it still missed the most obvious problem. There was almost no color. After the final correction, the image still looked very close to the neutral Rec 709 starting point. I think that just adding 1 node and increasing the saturation, of course I'm overdoing it right now a bit, but actually no, this alone changes the image completely. 6 advanced nodes produced less visible colors than just 1 simple adjustment. Maybe it simply needed a much clearer creative target, so instead of asking it for another natural grade, I gave it a completely different challenge. For the 3rd round, I asked for a dark fantasy look inspired by the atmosphere of the Harry Potter films. Cool blue-green color, deeper shadows, muted natural tones, soft highlights and a mysterious, slightly magical feeling. And ChatGPT did understand the basic idea. It cooled the image and shifted it slightly toward green. It reduced mid-tone detail to make the natural haze feel softer. It tried to create smoother highlights. Then it added a power window around the lighthouse and made it slightly brighter and more colorful. The lighthouse became easier to notice and gave the frame a clearer point of interest. ChatGPT also added a gradient over the sky, making it darker and more dramatic. Again, the idea made sense, but the foundation was still too weak. Actually, it's kind of nice, but I think that it lacks colors, and I don't know what to think about it. The image did not have enough contrast. After finishing the grade, I sent ChatGPT the result. And to my surprise, during its correction pass, it confidently said that the highlight roll-off was working well. But according to the scopes, this change didn't do anything at all. The final version moved closer to the requested atmosphere. But once again, the grade was only 1 or 2 basic corrections away from being much stronger. Maybe ChatGPT needed a tool specifically designed to create rich film color. For the final test, I used Dehancer Pro, the film emulation plugin that I also use in my own grades. I selected the correct camera input inside Dehancer and gave ChatGPT both the neutral frame and the official documentation. Its job was to build a complete grade from scratch inside one Dehancer node. And on paper, this was easily the most impressive response. It selected Kodak Vision 3 250D as the negative film profile. It added film compression to control the highlights. It used expand to set the tonal range. Then it selected Kodak 2383 as the print film. This did not look like random guessing, but once all of those decisions were combined, the result felt like a heavy film preset. I think that it lacks a bit of colors. This can be a dreamy scene. Now it's very not colorful, so I hope that it will see that. When ChatGPT saw its results, its diagnosis was actually good. It noticed the crushed shadows, excessive grain, green contamination and heavy contrast. But there was an even simpler problem. Just like the puffin only needed a basic saturation adjustment to reveal how much color was missing, this Dehancer grade was also surprisingly close to working. Changing one or two controls inside Film Developer was enough to bring back much of the missing color and separation. It was technically sophisticated and fundamentally incomplete at the same time. The manual taught ChatGPT what every control did. It did not teach it which control mattered most for this particular image. You can test Dehancer for free using the link below, and the code SHOT10 gives you 10% off if you decide to buy it. So, can ChatGPT actually color grade raw footage? Yes, but not in the way I expected. It's very good at explaining what different tools are designed to do, and after seeing the results, it can sometimes identify its own mistakes surprisingly well. As a learning assistant, it can be very useful, but it's not ready to replace creative judgment. It solved smaller problems before deciding what the whole image should actually feel like. In every case, the grade sounded more complete than it actually was, so I would not treat ChatGPT's values as exact instructions that must be trusted. Use it to understand what the tool does. Use it to suggest a technique you may not have considered. But toggle every node, watch the image, check the scopes, and make sure the correction is actually doing what the explanation claims. Interestingly, most of the problems ChatGPT created are also common human color grading mistakes. Working on small areas before building the base, using advanced tools because they sound more professional, and making the image technically safe but visually lifeless. I cover 6 of those mistakes and how to avoid them in this video. Thanks for watching, and remember, let your films be shot by reality.